Let us now take a look at how can we create the backgrounds for our game. Now, in order to represent our backgrounds, we are going to use something called a quad, and that's a 3D object. So we are going to go here under Game Object, then 3D Object, and select a quad. And this is going to be our background. So I'm simply going to rename it to background. And I'm going to remove the mesh collider from it because we don't need it. Mesh collider is for 3D. And I'm going to copy it, and this is going to be our ground. And let me just position it here. Now, in order to have an image, because we see now this is how our quad looks like, in order to have an image, we need to apply a material on it. So here we have these two materials that we need to apply. I'm going to go here in our assets and create a new folder, which I'm going to name materials. And inside of this folder, I'm going to create a material. This is going to be our background material. And I'm also going to create our ground material. So I'm going to rename it to ground material. Now, I'm going to select the material, and here in the inspector panel for the shader of that material. And shaders represents how our materials are going to be rendered. That's a separate topic. I'm not going to talk about it at the moment because it's really wide, but just know that they represent how our background or how the image or how the material is going to be rendered. So for the shader, I'm going to go under or click here for this list and go here under mobile, then particles and alpha blended. And for the image, for our background, I'm going to select the background. And for our ground, I'm going to do the same thing. So go here, click on this drop down list, then go under mobile or mobile, then particles and alpha blended. And for the texture here, simply select or click this select here and then select our ground. You can also drag and drop the sprite here, but this is a quicker way. So now for our background for the material, I'm going to drag and drop our background material here, and it's under materials, and simply click on this drop down list and then drag and drop our material right here. I'm going to do the same thing for our ground material or for our ground. So simply drag and drop the ground on it. And now what we are going to do, I'm going to reposition this one, let's say at -6. This is going to be our ground. We can also do this a little bit later or reposition it if we need to. Now what you're going to do is we're going to go here in our scripts folder and create that scripts folder. I have already created it. And here we have our background scripts. And inside of it, I've created this BG or background scaler script, which is, well, what the name says, it's going to scale our backgrounds. So let me just select both of them and apply our BG scaler script on them. So double click it, so MonoDevelop will open it. And in our background scaler, we are only going to use the start function. So what we are going to do is we are going to take the scale of our quads and we're going to resize them based on our camera's orthographic size, which is this size right here. At the moment, by default, the size is 5, which we are going to leave it there. And this is going to scale our background to fill the whole screen, and that way we can support multiple screen resolutions using our quads. So now here in the start function, what I'm going to do is I'm going to calculate the height, and the height of our quad, which is going to be the Y scale, is equal to our camera main dot orthographic size multiplied by 2. This is going to be the height or the Y scale of our quad. And now in order to calculate the width, we need the height, so we are going to say height multiplied by the screen width divided by the screen dot height, and this is going to be our width or the X scale of our quads. And now what we are going to do here is we are going to check if our game object dot name is equal to background. What we are going to do is we are going to say transform dot local scale is equal to new vector 3, and here we're going to pass the width for the X, the height for the Y, and 0 for well, Z. If I go back now, I have applied that on our background. So notice now this is what we have. If I run the game, we are going to see this background scaled up. So we see the scale for the x-axis is 17.78, so on and so forth. And for the y, it's 10. And now we also need to scale our foreground, our ground. So else here, if it's not our background, what we are going to do here is we are going to set the height automatically at 5 and the width is going to be at +3. We are setting this height at 5 because here we have our ground, which is also 512 by 512, and if I rerun it now, this is what we have. So this is our ground here, and you can see it here. I added 3 on purpose for our ground because we are going to apply a box collider on it, and we are going to start spawning our enemies or our obstacles from here. That's why we added a little bit on the width for our ground. And if I go back here and if I try to set the height, so I've set 5 here, but if I try to set the height, this is what we are going to get. So if I go back now and rerun the game, this is what we have now for our ground. So it's going to rescale it the same way it's scaling our background. Of course, if you draw your ground a different way, because here we have our ground 512 by 512, you can draw it something like 512 by 200. Then you can simply use also width and the height in the scale here. But because I draw it by 512 and 512, I'm going to set it here at 5. Now we are going to make our backgrounds scrollable. Before we create a script for that, we need to go here in our sprites and our background sprites. We need to select the background and the ground. And here where it says texture type, click here on this drop down list and go here under advanced. And here near the end, we need to select this wrap mode and set it from clamp to repeat, and also the filter mode from bilinear to point, and hit apply. So this is what we need to do for both of our background and ground in order to be able to scale them, or to be able to scroll them and simulate that infinite scrolling background effect. So now we can go in our scripts folder, and going here in our background scripts, I need to create another script, which is going to be BG Looper. And I'm going to select both of them, so our background and ground, and apply our BG Looper on them. So double click it and MonoDevelop will open it. Now, in order to use our BG Looper, we need a couple of variables. We need a public float speed, which I'm going to set at 0.1f. We need a private vector2, which is going to be the offset, and it's equal to new vector2. I'm simply going to say vector2.0 at the moment. And we also need a private material or a reference to our material, which I'm going to name mat or ME or MAT. So in the start function, we first need to get a reference to our material, and our material is equal to get component, and we need to get the render component, and dot material. This is going to give us our material. So using render, get component render dot material. Now using our material, we are going to get this offset, and we are going to say our offset is equal to material dot get texture offset, and we need to type here with an underscore, and we need to say main text. This is going to give us our texture offset, and we need to type it like this or otherwise it will not work. So underscore as a string underscore main text. And simply now in our update function, what we are going to do is we are going to say our offset.x plus equals our speed multiplied by time.delta time. And now we're going to say material.set texture offset. And again, we need to pass as a string our main text, comma, our offset. So here we are getting the texture offset using get texture offset, passing as a string main text underscore main text. And in order to set the offset, we need to say set texture offset underscore main text and passing our offset. And we are ready to go. So now we can go back. We have applied the script to both our background and our ground. And I'm simply going to set for our background for the speed, let's say at 0.2. And now when I run the game, we are going to see both of our ground and background scrolling. And the nice part, or the cool part of it, is that we can now use the speed in order to speed it up or to slow it down or even move it backwards. Anyway, we can, as I said, manipulate our speed, and that way we can, well, manipulate how we are scrolling our background. We are also going to add a box collider to our ground, and we are going to save them here in our prefabs folder. So folder here, create background prefabs. And here I'm simply going to drag and drop our background and our ground. So we are practically finished, well, with our backgrounds.